time I do come up here, but let's see. Prior, as mentioned, they were tennis courts, and right now it's a rock field with some trees in there. And then also the tennis courts were very high fencing with windproof screening, so it was an eyesore and a height issue to begin with. So I just don't feel the houses will be a significant issue there. Let's see. After the approval, there's still nearly double the open space required from the staff report and in my study. And then also with the prior speakers, I just had to speak to this. We disagree with the statement of community manager mismanagement of finances and believe that really is not under the DRB's purview, from my understanding. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have received the petition. Is there any further action required in the petition? Right. Thank you.
There is not, no.
Okay. Is the applicant here, prepared to make a presentation? Yes, please step forward to the podium.
My name is Heit Flexman, and I'm the president of our association, and the instigator of all this, I guess. But to counteract what some of these people have said, they talked about this being an open space when they moved in and bought their houses, and it was never going to be built on. Those tennis courts have been there since 1985 or something like that, when that subdivision was originally put in. Over the last it's been about 4 years now, they were in bad state of repair, and the community wasn't agreeable to go forward with the cost of redoing the tennis courts. So ultimately, they were locked up for about 2 years. They were blacktop or asphalt tennis courts, which had heaved and cracked, and they were just unsafe to use anymore. So since we didn't have funds to remove the courts, we were going to take them down. We came to the city to get our permit to remove the courts, and they asked us what we were going to do with that piece of land, and they said, well, we were just going to put gravel down for the time being until we had funds or could come up with a plan to do something else with that. And during that process, it was the city that suggested to us that we could include 2 or maybe even 3 lots in that section of land. We kind of passed it off at the time, but and went ahead and did the landscaping as required by the city. And it contains about 13 trees. So, and their plan was that over a period of time, those trees are going to grow and they're going to cover and shade that whole area. They're going to be higher than what the tennis courts were. When these people bought their homes, there were the tennis courts there with 12-foot high fences with the windbreak material covering it. So all you saw when you looked across the street were the tennis courts. You may have saw at the top of the mountains, but most of it was blocked by the tennis courts. So going on from there, we were looking for ways to reduce our cost and to save money for our association. Being it's 30 some odd years old, there's been lots of issues with irrigation because we're responsible for irrigating the front lawns of this place. And we've spent a lot of money. Every time we seem to build our reserve fund up, there's been another major break or something that's, run our reserves down again. So we were looking for something that we could, increase our reserve fund. And that's when we went back and remembered what the city had told us about doing 2 lots. We got our attorneys involved and looked, do we have the right to do this? And they came back, yes, it is our property. It's the manor's property. It's not Sweetwater Ranch in Hole's property. We have total control of that. We maintain it. It's our responsibility. So we started to look into the, what we could do with the land, and we went back to what the city had said and looked at the cost of what it would cost to do it, to get it replatted, and what was the value of the land. And we went forward with our vote from our community, and it came back positive. We had the required number of votes to move forward with selling the property. Once we got that approval, we started looking at the value of the property and what it was going to cost to do all the work, the civil engineering, the surveying, and the like that had to be done. And we found a person that was interested in a piece of property that was willing to pay the price we asked for it. And I volunteered to be his leg man to run all this process through the city. And so that's what we've been doing for almost a year now, since we first started. But the homes that are going to be built, I mean, our subdivision, there's only 4 models in our subdivision. The new homes have to comply with one of those 4 designs. They have to look identical from the outside as the other homes in the community. They have to be painted the same as, you know, the color palette that's approved for our community. So most of the homes, the majority of the homes in our development are 1-story homes, and they are the most saleable homes in the community. There are some 2 stories, but it'll be up to the developer that's person that, you know, purchased the property, what they're going to put there. So, I mean, that's where we are. This property has nothing to do with Sweetwater Ranch as a whole. Again, it belongs to Sweetwater Ranch Manor community. The other people that are complaining and talking about this, they belong to the enclave. This piece of property is not part of their community. It's, you know, it's strictly our property. And while some of them have called and said, we want to put in a dog park and all these things, we want it for the whole community, it's not the whole community's property. It's Manor One's property. And we want to redevelop to gain these funds for our reserve fund. That's it, unless you have any questions.
Thank you. You mentioned the required number of homeowners voted for this.
Right. We had to have 3/4 of the homeowners vote for this. We have 94 properties currently in our community, and so we had to have 3/4 of those, or is it 2/3? We had to get 62 votes. We had 64 votes for it. We had 20 votes against it.
But that was just in your HOA.
That's in our HOA because it has nothing to do with the other 4 communities that are in the Sweetwater Ranch, overall community.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
I have a question for the applicant. Yes, can you describe what your methodology of outreach and your community engagement process was for this? Was it solely was there any community engagement in a surrounding radius of the impacted property, or was it solely something that was kept between the Manor
It was
HOA?
sent out as required by the city to everybody within is it 400 or 400? I don't know the radius, but it went out yet to.
So it followed standard procedures for the preliminary plat follows a similar procedure for community notification.
Board Member Brand, that's correct. The applicant sent out the 750 and the city did as well.
We have questions down this end, too.
Yes, I have a
Yes,
question.
you have a question?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, a couple of things. I mean, looking into, and again, I'm not getting into the financial of the HOA, but it seems like there is lack of fund, there is lack of maintenance. You thought, okay, you know what, maybe we can develop those 2 lots, create some fund money to help with maintenance and sustain the HOA expenses. I'm assuming this summarizes what's going on, or?
That's right, yes, and we wanted another use for this piece of property, because right now, as the people in our community call it a moonscape, because that's what it looks like. You got all these little twigs that are planted right now that we had to plant, and the rest of it's gravel, and it's not very attractive.
Is it getting to be used by the community right now? Is this gravel area get to be used by the neighbor?
Is it being used by the neighbors?
Yes.
It's not supposed to be used by the neighbors, it's not their property.
So it's not a common area?
No, it's,
So here's my dilemma, because we come here, I mean, we see through the process. I mean, I've been planning commission, DRB, and at one point of time, this plat went through a council hearing, went through a planning process, correct? And a lot of times, those plats get to be approved based on a site plan, based on a lot layout. So when this get to be presented, when I look back to what you show here, I'm assuming this area was presented as an open area to sustain all of this future lots development. Is this the case? I mean, I guess this question to staff, I'm just curious.
it wasn't open space. It's always had the tennis court since this community was built.
Understood, which is amenities part of the subdivision. Was it developed as amenities to have a tennis court?
Board Member Faki, the area is platted as a tract, which contributes to open space and common area, and it did contain both the pool and tennis court amenities originally.
Okay. So, I mean, I understand why is the HOA doing it, I really do. But at the same time, it's really concerning to me that we're doing this in a case because it's old, it's 30 years or 35 years of plat, where we go back and say, hey, whatever you went through the process, you promised the board at the time we're giving you a tennis court, we're giving you amenities, a pickleball, whatever you're giving them. But at the same time passed, and by the way, we're removing those amenities. I mean, this seems to me, the approval of the subdivision could have been based on these amenities end. So I'm not sure how staff makes a judgment that these amenities could go away. It's not part of the original site plan, because I'm assuming it's tied to the site plan
But the
that was
commu-
approved.
The community voted about taking down those.
I understand. I'm just going back to the original case. Do we have any, clarification from the original zoning case?
Can I add to that question, Board Member Faki? I do want to find out from Mr. Barnes if this was, when it was passed through zoning, if it was passed through collectively as the Sweetwater, meaning there was not a division on the original case between the enclave and the manor. I realize that they're separated now, you have separate HOAs, but when this was originally platted as a neighborhood, did that go through at the same time? Because in your presentation, the square that you drew around the entire property showed both the enclave and the manor.
Board members, so the zoning action did go through with the overall 40-acre square identified for the R4 zoning within that PCD. And so as it physically platted out, there were the different subdivision plats, but it was contemplated at the zoning level as best our records show to intend the whole 40 acres to be that townhouse residential area, which is why the calculations that are provided in the staff report refer to the overall as far as open space and density and those things go.
So, go ahead.
And just touching back to Board Member Faki's question, I don't know that I've got anything solid that I saw in the records that stipulated there must specifically in that open space area be a tennis court and a pool area and those things. And so that's another part of why we're presenting to you that from a technical standpoint, this is our analysis.
And I bring this up because we all go through this planning process, and part of getting project approved a lot of time is what kind of amenities you're proposing, what kind of landscaping you're bringing in, what kind of entrance improvement you're doing, right? So all of these could have been discussion that happened at the zoning case that I think it really makes sense for us to learn about. The second piece, when I dealt with those tracts, and again, I don't have title report, I have no idea, but usually tract is owned by the HOA, correct? I'm assuming the HOA who's before us today has a full ownership of this tract, or is it owned by the residents, partial ownership? How is the ownership of this tract right now?
It's owned by the HOA,
It's
Manor One HOA.
Okay, so, and again, one thing, let me summarize. From my side, the way this is presented, I'm not a support. Now, if it get to be continued to discuss it further, I would like to learn on this HOA ownership, when we've done some similar cases where you go in and you get signature from 75% of the residents, it depends how the declaration was put in place, right? So if I heard you correctly, you guys did just 750 feet of notification, but I'm just curious about the ownership of this piece of land. If the HOA own it, does it have a full right just to use it, I guess, or to do whatever to do, do with it? I thought HOA just maintained stuff. I didn't think you guys could develop and sell.
No, we actually own it, and
Okay.
we actually had our attorneys go and look into this, and they came back and say, yes, we own it, and we have the right to do with it as our community sees fit with it.
Fair enough. So if this is the case, when come down, looking at from straight DRB, and looking at the site plan that is approved, I have hard time approving another 2 lots here when you have a subdivision that has amenity in place, and we're coming in, we're just adding 2 residential lots and removing those amenities. And I know it's not there anymore, I understand, but it used to be there, and hopefully, one day it could go back to be better amenities than used to exist. But this is one of my main challenges, so thank you.
I have a comment as well.
Yes, Mr. Brand?
Twofold. To continue on what Board Member Faki was speaking about, I think usually when we see these cases, when there's additional tracks, there's tracks that are put in place and then an adjustment to the existing open space or an improvement to some of the existing conditions that is a resultant, almost like a trade-off for the community, that if we do the additional track work, then maybe there's money or the availability to do improvements to the remaining open space, but none of that is being presented today. So that's one part. The second part of this is that I do a lot of community engagement for commercial development and mixed-use commercial projects. We do a lot of community outreach meetings and a lot of things. If we were looking at making modifications to an open space that was literally right across the street, 14 feet or 18 feet of right-of-way from houses that were existing residents for 30 years, and we did not include them as input sources for what we were doing, we would be excoriated at a public hearing. That's the very definition of not doing collaborative work. You have a case here that was passed through zoning and platted with a joint agreement. Granted, it's 2 HOAs right now, but from what I'm hearing, it doesn't sound like there's been communal conversation about benefit to the surrounding community. It's like, hey, we own this side of the street, but at the center line of the street, you guys have nothing to do and nothing to say with this property because we own it. As a neighbor, I would ask you to take a second if you would appreciate that, if that happened to you. If you lived across the street from an open space that a commercial developer owned and they just filled in the open space with something that was zoning by right and they didn't take the chance to meet with you as someone that lived across the street. I know that's a little bit different case, but I can just say that I've been in a lot of fiery meetings, and it's because we reach out and we try to get everyone's input that's impacted by the decisions that we're making. So I just don't see how this case has adequately addressed the impact of people that are adequately addressed input from the people that it's impacting. And I do respect from a property ownership that you do have property rights to do what you choose with it. But on this board, we're talking about quality, and we have to look at broad community impact, not just the center line of a right-of-way of a street, and we don't care about how it impacts anybody else. So that's my take on this. I do think that there's a solution that is probably a middle of the road, but I think it's future conversation from maybe a continuance. So I'm just stating that I'd be in support of a continuance to go back and continue to work with staff on this case.
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
I'm sorry,
This is
I made
board
my
members
living
just
in
about to speak.
residential mortgages for people that were building homes. And if I had $1 for every time I had a buyer sit in front of me and say, the developer promised me this, and then they're trying to take it away, I'm very, very sensitive to that. But I do have a question about the outreach that went to the neighborhood that you were talking about, because everything I'm hearing, the reason this is being brought forth is to supplement a shortfall in the HOA. HOAs have to have a supplement, because what happens is some lenders will look at an HOA's financial statement before they'll agree to lend in there. So that becomes a to me, an issue of value. If your HOA is not properly funded, some lenders will refuse to lend in there. So the alternative to the shortfall, if the lots aren't sold, have you calculated the surcharge to the existing homeowners and explained that to them? Has that been discussed in this meeting that you had where 64 people voted for it?
Well, we made it known that, that there is a shortfall, and we need to increase our reserve funds. And we said this is one way we could do it. Otherwise, there's going to have to be a special assessment for all the community. And most of the people in our community are on fixed incomes. We're mostly retired, and nobody has or can afford all those the costs that would be involved with that. And so we're looking out for the people in our community, and trying to keep our costs down. With the sale of this property, we can actually keep our monthly dues where they are, because parts of those goes to the reserve fund every month. And so we're trying to look out for the people in our community, yes. And as far as the other communities, we sent out over 400 notifications about what we were doing. And with my name, my contact information, I only got 3 people to contact me, and only one of those was from the enclave. And the others were some other communities that didn't realize where we were in relationship to their communities. So,
Thank you. I am going to vote for a continuance with some of my other board members, but my suggestion would be nothing gets people's attention like a dollar number. So I would suggest that you come to some type of a dollar number that assessment is going to be, and present that to them. And if they still vote to do that, then that's up to your homeowners association. But since you haven't anteed up a number, I'm suspecting that maybe that hasn't been calculated. And if people are talking about, I want to save my lot and my open space for $10 a month, that's one conversation. If the conversation is, we're short reserves and you're going to get assessed $5,000, that's another conversation. So I'm being interrupted, so go ahead.
No, I was going to point out that the people across the street aren't part of the same HOA, so they don't have, the assessment would not occur to them. It's only the
Right.
people in the
Okay.
manor who would receive
Okay.
the assessment. So the
Okay.
people that are opposing this are all from the enclave.
Okay. I still think you need to add a dollar amount, because that gets people's attention much more than, hey, we're considering this and we think this is what we should do.
well, we never actually gave a dollar amount, but we did talk to our people in our meeting that says, look, if we don't do this, we are going to have to find another way to raise funds. The only other way we can raise funds is by an assessment. We didn't put a dollar value to it, but, just talking about assessments, everybody says, we don't want anything to do with that.
That word means different things to different people
Yeah.
based on their income level.
That's right.
So,
And that's-
anyway,
That's a big thing in our community, because like I said, 3/4 of the people in our community are on fixed incomes.
Right.
So,
Mr. Brand made a motion to continue this case.
Vice Mayor, if I may, real quickly, this is Brad over here.
Oh.
I do know that Board Member Gushgari would like the opportunity to speak before you move on that motion.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The community discussion, in my opinion, is a private matter.
Tell him we can't.
I don't think this board should get involved in the process of moderating between property owners, homeowners, and a community association. The community association typically has its own CCNR to basically dictate what they can and cannot do. That's not the purview of this board decision. I see this case has 2 subject matter here. One is the open space. Number 2, which is more importantly, is the original recorded final plat for this development. There has been many discussions back and forth about the open space, the community and the amenities and this and that. If the original final plat under the dedication statement clearly states that this open space should be allocated for specific usage, such as amenities and recreation, then that has to dictate that this area should not be allocated and dedicated to any other use. But we don't know that. So staff must look at the original recorded plat to see what the dedication statement states specifically about the use of this specific area. That's number one. The other thing I see it is the open space. Throughout the whole city of Scottsdale, we have development everywhere that are required to open space dedication to a certain guideline that requires and defines how many square feet or acres that may be, the dedication should be. A lot of development throughout the whole city sometimes dedicate more area than is what's required. By virtue of that extra dedication, the city standards and guidance allows that development to basically vacate and or rededicate that open space that is extra, provided it does not go below the minimum requirement that is required through the plating process. That is critical. I think this homeowner association has the right, by design guideline, by ordinance, to vacate an excess of dedicated open space, provided the original final plat dedication is not violated. That is the only thing that I'm unclear on. What is the original final plat dedication states? That's the only reason I will not support this approval, but support the continuous. But other than that, I support it the way it is. But again, repeat myself, I will not approve it only because I don't really know what the dedication of the final plat says. That is really crucial, in my opinion. So that would be my position. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Gushgari. Ms. Joyner, you didn't formally state your comments as a second, but
I'm happy to second.
is that what you intended? Thank you.
Yeah, you sort of did.
Any other comments?
Vice Mayor, if I may, real quickly, I don't know if Mr. Brand actually formally made the motion.
I did not make a motion. I was just
Fixing
saying.
that right now.
I was just saying that I would be in support of that, but I did not make a motion.
All right, thank you. Would you be willing to make the motion at this point?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to continue this case, case 10-PP-2022, to re-examine the circumstances of the original plat prior to moving forward with the granting of the existing plat on this case.
Thank you.
And I'll second that.
Thank you for the second.
Vice Mayor, real quickly, before we make a motion or an action on that, is that to a date to be determined, Board Member Brand?
Yes, that's to a date to be determined.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. There's been a motion and a second to continue case 10-PP-2022, replat of Tract D, Sweetwater Ranch Manor, to a date to be determined. Could you please take the roll call?
Vice Mayor Durham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgari,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgs.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is 14-DR-2022, Seventh-day Adventist Warehouse Building. We have a presentation from the staff.
Hi, good afternoon, Vice Mayor Durham, Commissioner Higgs, Development Review Board members. My name is Wayland. I'm a planner here with the City of Scottsdale, here to present case 14-DR-2022, Seventh-day Adventist Warehouse Building. To start with the request, it is for a new warehouse building, approximately 243,360 square feet in size, on an 18-acre portion of the overall 75-acre Seventh-day Adventist site. As we look at the context aerial, this site is situated just south of Scottsdale Airport, with the Phoenix city limits to the west, and adjacent single family to the south and southeast. As we zoom into the detail aerial, we see the 18-acre portion nestled to the northeast of the Seventh-day Adventist church site, on the corner of North Scottsdale Road and Redfield, just above Sutton Drive. You'll notice that there is the Scottsdale Park and Ride to the west and a private aircraft taxi lane directly north that will be retained with this project proposal. So we look at a superimposed site plan over the aerial. The site is outlined there in yellow with the 243,000 square foot, one-story warehouse. A few items to note for this proposal would be access. So we highlight the section there to the west. The access will be gained primarily from a private access easement to the north, but there will also be a new paved access to the city's park and ride with pedestrian connection to the west. As far as frontage improvements, we can shift our focus to the east side along 76th Street, which would include pavement widening, undergrounding of those overhead utilities, 8-foot wide public trail, as well as a 60-foot landscape buffer between the adjacent single-family district. Lastly, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, there is a private taxi lane that will be retained by this project to the north with an uncovered airplane staging area with direct access via the warehouse construction. Some key items for today. This project is the first phase of a 3-phase development plan. Prior zoning case was approved in 2019 for the planned air park core development zones. We did receive one written comment that's in your packet for the request, which was in regards to clarification on the project scope. As I mentioned, there was a prior 2019 rezoning case for the PCP. As you can see, this site has the aviation and employment sections over it. For context, here is the overall phasing plan. We see we're focusing on phase 1 right now with this 14DR case. The applicant has outlined conceptual phase 2 as well as the phase 3, but this project proposal right now is for that phase 1. For a rendering here and some colors and materials, we find it to be consistent with our design guidelines and the Greater Air Park character area plan. Primary muted earth tone colors, as well as a variety of materials and adequate articulation on the building. We can see that those freight bays will be located to the south of the building with a primary entrance to the north. Maximum height of this proposed structure is 42 feet. Landscaping, a generous amount of native plants will be utilized, and as you can see on the far right-hand side there, that we will have some landscaping extending all the way down 76th Street to Sutton Drive with that 8-foot public trail. So again, the action requested today is for approval of project plans for a new one-story warehouse building, approximately 243,360 square feet of building area on that 18-acre portion. Staff recommendation today is approval, subject to stipulations. Staff finds that the proposal is consistent with the DRB criteria, design guidelines, Greater Air Park character area plan as well. That assessment is in your report. That concludes staff's presentation. The applicant, Kurt Jones, is here to conduct his presentation. Thank you.
We have one comment from the public first. Let's hear that one from Mr. Langbeer.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. Brent Langben. I'm a homeowner at 13613 North 76th Street. I'm a commercial developer, been in the Valley for 42 years in Scottsdale. If I could show you. Current place of speaking, can you use the mouse on the screen? Oh, okay. How do you do it? Just move the mouse. Oh, could I show slide 2? It's almost easier to see.
We just need to be able to hear you speak in the microphone is the main concern.
No problem. I'm just trying to find the, if y'all can follow, we live right at the, basically at the corner, 1 street south of the Thunderbird 76 Alliance. So we're within of the access there where the yellow line is, we're probably, the front of our lot is maybe 60 feet or so from the property. Couple concerns, and we're as a developer, I've been on both sides of this, speaking to council in Glendale and also Phoenix. So and now I'm a homeowner, so it's a little different emotions and all that come into play. We're excited about the property being rezoned. There's just some concerns in regards to tweaking the use, and the big one is the runway that runs, it hasn't been used frequently since the 40s when the Thunderbird Academy was there. This runway is going to have staging airplanes that are sitting within 200 feet of our front of our property. And I don't want the noise, I don't want the waste and all, because on certain days we can even smell the jet fuel, and I have another neighbor who will testify to that, coming from the runway, which is nothing we can accept. I mean, that's part of the fact, but that runway is probably 2,500 feet away, maybe 3,000 feet. This would be 200 feet from my front door. So I really don't want aircraft. There's no reason for it. This is a warehouse. It's not an aircraft aviation storage, and there's no reason for it up in that right northeast corner, if you look at it. The other thing is there's a 30-foot buffer on the east side. I don't know how to do this mouse, so I apologize. But on the east side of the, where the yellow line is on the far east side, there is a 30-foot utility easement there. And currently they have water in that utility easement, and they have above-ground power poles, which are going to be put underground per the application. We would ask that they'd also would run sewer line up through that easement. It would be 10 cents, 20 cents on the dollar to do it now than to do it after you pave it, put a pedestrian path in, do all the improvements to the site, and then come back in 3 years later and tear it all out and start all over. You could do I'm assuming the city would do a payback, sewer payback, which is you'd have 9 properties, residential properties that would be affected with that, and then you'd have the church property that would be affected. And for their future, obviously they have phase 1, there's 3 phases, there might be more, I know how that goes. Eventually, I understand they're going to want to do residential on phase 3 at the south end by the ballparks. This would allow that opportunity by putting the sewer in today and not 5 years from now and spend 4 times the amount of money to do that. It's also a hazardous waste thing. We have older sewer septic systems that are designed, 20, 30, 40 years ago on a lot of these houses. They need to be upgraded. And it'd be a win-win for the developer, and it'd be a win-win for the neighbors to share in some of those costs with the payback. So I would strongly endorse that we do that now while we have virgin dirt and not a lot of stuff to move. And I appreciate your support of that. In regards to the ingress, regress, I'm okay with that, but I did see on one of the site plans, I think it's, if you go to the next slide, slide 3, I'm sorry, right here. The ingress is up in the north corner, and then a future one with the ADOT bus terminal. I asked that I see that there's, I think it's 60 box truck storage. What is all that? Is that 60 18-wheelers? What are we talking about? Size of those staging area. And if that is indeed the case, the original ingress for that, correct me if I'm wrong, came through the west side, came around to the east side of the building, and then back to the south side. I would ask if they want to keep those 60 box truck storage, that they come in from the north side and then go from the west to the east, not go all the way around the building, which would be right in front of our house. And we'd have to hear the beep, 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 which we hear now. I have another neighbor who will attest to it. When the landscape companies come and go there, currently the use that they're doing, we hear at 4:30 in the morning, the dogs start barking, and then we hear beep, beep, beep with the backup of the big trucks and the waste trucks that come in 2 or 3 times a week taking garbage out of there. So if they could, best case is if they could just run it from the north side around the northwest side of the building and come around to the southwest side instead of going all the way around the building. It would cut down the noise, cut down on the dust, cut down on exhaust, et cetera, et cetera. Again, I appreciate your support. I don't know if you have any questions for me.
I had one question, Mr. Langbin.
Yes, sir.
How does this proposal, you mentioned the fumes from the airplanes and so forth and so on, how does this proposal affect that, for better or for worse?
Well, I think it's for better. I do, because I think it's kind of a shield.
Okay.
But let's clarify that with that staging area in the northeast corner of aircraft that could be possibly staged there, I don't want any of that. I don't think it's an enhancement. I don't think it should be part of the project. If they want to stage those aircraft, they've got plenty of other land by the to the west there that has no neighbors, no effect to the neighborhood, and they could stage aircraft there if they've got to do a minor redesign. You know, this is the intent of this was to be a commercial warehouse, not a airplane hangar.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have a presentation from the applicant?
Thank you, Vice Mayor, members of the Development Review Board. Kurt Jones with Tiffany and Bosco. We're at 2525 East Camelback Road in Phoenix, 85016, here with LGE, Creation Equity, and this proposal. I'm not going to go through my entire presentation, but the zoning case that was approved a few years back was to basically allow the school and the religious facility to remain on the site and develop the areas around the school, and that's everything north and sort of west of that yellow dashed line on the property. Some of these graphics Wayland went through, and just want to get to some of the concerns of the neighbor. With regards to the FAA, we are approved by the FAA to build this building at 42 feet in height. Some of the building heights, if I go to the very end of this presentation, this is, again, this is the area in which the neighbor was speaking of. I believe this is his house, or it's this house. I'm not sure which one. This big one? This one. Okay. So, the newest, which okay. So, again, along this side of Miller Road is an oleander hedge. That oleander hedge, and I've got a graphic here that shows that this is what the residents look at. There's some areas that aren't as healthy as this that are now being watered. They've been watered since the zoning case. That oleander hedge is going to remain, and so I wanted to make sure that the landscape plan that I'm going to show you includes not only all the landscaping in the 60-foot landscape buffer. I believe the neighbors had a 30-foot landscape buffer. It's a 60-foot landscape buffer. To the use, so when we went through zoning, this was the land plan for the uses in that area. As you can see, there was proposed a significant area for aviation uses. What this case does is take away almost all aviation potential for the Seventh-day Adventist property, and it leaves this small area, and I'll go back up to the landscape plan. It leaves a small area for two planes that the Seventh-day Adventists still own, and they still try to allow their high school students to learn how to fly. And that would be this area here. So, again, the zoning case allowed many aviation uses, many potential for airplanes, hangars, outdoor and indoor. And what ends up happening with this DR case is basically reserves it to a space that allows for two single engine tie downs. That is going to be a completely walled-in facility that allows access through this area here to the taxiway. So with that, again, leaving all of the oleander hedge for screening, providing a trail. Right now it's just a dirt patch on the west side of that road. We're required by the city's transportation department to put in a 20-foot half street, leaving it sort of rural in nature. Since that road is rural in nature, we're not putting a sidewalk in, we're putting a trail in on the west side, on the east side of that oleander hedge. We're taking down a power line that's along the west side of the street and along basically above those that oleander hedge, and creating a dense landscape buffer for the property. Finally, with regard to the truck traffic, again, back to the land plan, there was a potential for a series of parking lots and buildings and layouts for buildings in this area. What we're doing is one building. We're not utilizing the full 60 feet in height that was approved through zoning. We're only going to a 42-foot parapet. There are ways in and out of the back of that property on the east end and the west end. The west end is obviously closer to Redfield Road. Let me get that site plan back up. And so you'll have the ability to come in off of Redfield here and into the bay. That's the simplest way. There is a way out through here, but not sure what the percentage of traffic will use that. With that, I think I answered most of the questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions of the Development Review Board.
Vice Mayor,
Yes.
would you mind addressing the question about the sewer lines?
Oh, thank you. Apologize for not addressing that. With that, I think you guys had a significant conversation on the previous case with regards to what was required when it went through zoning. We had a significant review process through our zoning case. The trail, the street, the buffer, the setbacks, the height, the removal of the power lines, those were all the requirements of our zoning case. We're implementing all of that with this case. The sewer line, we're getting our sewer off of Redfield. There was no water or sewer stipulations that required us to put any dry line in Miller Road. I think all the homes that are in Miller Road were built during the time they were allowing septic, so that's the reason for the request by the homeowner. But no, we do not have plans to put the sewer line in as part of this project. Thank you for reminding me.
Any further questions for the applicant? What kind of materials are going to be stored in this warehouse?
Vice Mayor, at this point, we don't have specific end users for this. It could be one user, or it could be divided up into 3 to 4 users.
But it doesn't necessarily relate to the Seventh-day Adventists. It could be other commercial users.
Correct. Yes.
Thank you. If no further questions, is there a motion to approve of case 14-DR-2022, Seventh-day Adventist Warehouse Building?
Vice Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve of case 14-DR-2022, Seventh-day Adventist Warehouse Building. Could you please call the roll?
Vice Mayor Durham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgary,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgs.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next case is 51-DR-2022, which is Norday Exterior Paint. It's a request for approval of project plans for an exterior repaint of a portion of an existing building in the historic Old Town area for a property located at 7238 East Main Street with central business downtown overlay, C-2 DO zoning. Do we have a presentation from staff?
Yes. Thank you, Vice Mayor, Commissioner Higgs, and board members. I'm Casey Steinke, planner with the City of Scottsdale Planning Department, here for case 51-DR-2022. You can see the site location here right downtown on Main Street between Scottsdale Road and Brown Avenue. And closer up, we can see we're in the frontier area of historic Old Town. And the zoning on this site is commercial C2 with the downtown overlay. So before jumping into the colors, just for a little bit of reference, this building is primarily comprised of board and batten wood, though this particular suite does have a base that's stucco. The most recently approved colors for this was back in 2020. You can see on this image here, the body is spiced cedar with that green avocado trim. And then the colors that the applicant is proposing, which already exists, so they've been applied to the building, so the images you see there are current. Again, primarily we're looking at white with a light pink trim on the parapet and that canopy fascia, though that base, that stucco base, is split between solid white and light pink. And some potential considerations for your determination today include the general list of Scottsdale design guidelines, the specific character area for this historic Old Town guidelines, and then the existing context within that surrounding built environment. And with that, the applicant requests approval for this new color scheme at her existing business at 7238 East Main Street. That concludes staff presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have the business owner present here.
Yes, would the applicant care to make a presentation? Yes, you. Please go to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is Mandy Baller, and I am the owner of the North Scottsdale. If you don't mind, my daughter, who's actually worked there, is going to talk to you guys. Is that okay?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, City Council members. My name is Faith Ballard, and I work at North Scottsdale. I'm going to explain about what North Scottsdale is. It's a women's Western clothing boutique located in the heart of our beloved historical town, right here on Main Street. We opened doors in April of 2021, and it brought a variety of different clothing, demographic, but most importantly, a fun twist to the Main Street area. We have become well known for our rhinestone cowgirl boots, Western graphic tees, and unique accessories. When you look around Old Town Scottsdale, you are met with the same charm that has been present since 1888. Our current color of our building, as you saw, is a cascade beige with the color ashes of roses as our trim. Not only does our color set us apart from our neighboring businesses next to us, but it is also a part of our brand. Believe me, if I could have it any way, our color would be a bright pink with glitter and rhinestones all over it. I would also like to note that the previous tenants, Rock of Ages, who were there in our space for decades, at once had their color, 90% of their building similar to ours with a colored trim. Since we opened, we have had no complaints or issues from anyone in regards to the color of our building. Our landlord and owner of our space has also approved of our color and still does. This situation unfortunately arose when we were trying to get our sign made for above the store. Being a very small business, literally we are 400 square feet, and we are we're a small business. It's very important that we get a sign made, especially with the 2023 Super Bowl being held here in Arizona next month with many other main events. I ask that you please reconsider the decision in favor of maintaining the color of our building. We have always respected and appreciated the history that Old Town Scottsdale holds. The Sugar Bowl, for example, is a bubblegum pink and has been around since 1958, as you all may know, and they have been grandfathered into Old Town's history because of the significant length they've been there. Who's to say we won't as well? So a lot of people go to the Sugar Bowl. It's like, you know, that's like the main draw, I would say, to the Sugar Bowl is their pink color. We are not pink. I would say it's more of like, if you saw it in person, it's a very light trim. We have had, I mean, within the 2 years we've been open, we have brought so many people to Main Street just because we're just different than what's on Main Street right now. And I would consider us, you know, on Main Street as our own tourist attraction because we're very unconventional in what we do. As much as I you know, the terracotta with the orange and the green, it's, you know, it's Western. But we are squished in between two neighboring businesses. We're very small. So if we were to change our color back to the orange and green, we would blend in with the other buildings. So not only is this a part of our brand, like the pink is a part of the Sugar Bowls brand, I just feel as if, you know, this is just who we are. I honestly, I don't see us leaving anytime soon. And people travel all over the country to shop with us. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me. It's very scary being up here.
I made her do it. It's good for her.
She made me do it. I wanted to do it, but she did push me to do it. But yes, thank you again, guys, for listening to me. And hopefully you accept our color, because we sell pink rhinestone boots. So, you know, marketing-wise, like the colors just don't make sense for us. So just with our brand. Thank you, guys.
I think you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very. I'm not very dressed for like this. I kind of was like.
We had to close the store to come here.
Yes.
Yeah. It's okay.
I just shot over here. You have a question?
Vice Mayor,
Yes.
I just have a question for staff. I think, what's the challenge with staff on this 400 square feet, the color that they presented, I guess?
Board Member Fakih, the challenge is there's a lot of gray area between something that's strictly meeting the guidelines and something someone might call like an abomination. So we're not saying this is some sort of sore thumb per se. It's simply that it does not match the series of specific guidelines in this particular area to maintain this frontier town kind of theme. We have in the report specific colors, low saturation, desert colors, you know, purples and dark greens and stuff like that. And so in this particular case, when it doesn't strictly meet that, we feel the best entity to authorize that kind of approval is you guys, the board, that have that authority.
I mean, it just, and I appreciate that, but it's just mind-blowing to me. We see cases that go on consent that tons of complication and hair on it, and then we see something like this on regular that I think you guys could make a decision on, but just my 2 cents. This being said, I'm supportive of this, and I will move to approve it as well. Thank you.
Commissioner Higgs?
Yes. Do you have a side-by-side color swatch of what the request is versus what? Yeah, maybe. And I don't know if it might be better to maybe, is it possible to pass it around the board? There's a little bit of a glare when it's placed up on the overhead. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, while she's passing
Commissioner
that.
Craig?
Thank you.
I actually drove this property today, and I agree you need a sign. And it's a very small piece of property hedged in between two much larger properties. And I personally did not find the pink offensive at all. And if I'd have known you sold pink cowboy boots, I would have been in sooner. So I'm in favor of this as well. So I'll second your motion.
I have a question and comment too. And to Board Member Fakih's point, we do see a lot of these, and more recently, paint issues come to the board. And I drove down there the other day as well. I did not think about stopping in for rhinestone boots. I actually thought about going to the Rusty Spur and having a beer, but I was still on the clock. And I guess for staff, you know, the frontage and the parapet above the roof is all one unit, and I guess I don't have much of a problem with this, because what it does is it demarcates this building from both above and below, because you walk underneath, you don't see that parapet above. My one question is, I guess with below the, I guess the gutter and the, sorry, but there's the green, and I wish there was a way that that could just maybe be modified slightly so that it goes over to the column or to the post. That's my only comment on this. Hopefully it's something that isn't too much of a stretch for the applicant to perhaps make that minor change. And those are my comments.
I have one comment.
Mr. Brand?
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Durham. I was going to make the same comment. It's clearly these are modifications that were made by the landlord, correct? At the request of you guys who are the tenant. I thought the case was on the agenda because of the white. Is there the white that's been used or that was used for the paint? Is that within the 70% LRV?
Board Member Brand, unfortunately, we weren't able to get the specific colors from the applicant, which is why I introduced them as white and lime pink and why the applicant had more specific colors. So I can't comment on the reflectivity.
It looks
It's a Cascade beige.
It's a beige. Okay. It's not a white. It's a beige. Okay.
It's like it's a
Great.
muted.
Okay. You don't need to. I'm satisfied with the word beige. The words that we want to avoid are pure white and bright white in here, and so that's why I thought this was on the agenda because of the white range, the reflectance. I actually think that traditionally, both the history of this building and traditionally with inline, also historically with Western shops like this, you do see subtle paint changes at the batten area. So the batten nature of this supports it. I like it. I would suggest to the landlord, as just commentary during this case, that they do paint the underside of the canopy on the front side a singular color, perhaps something that goes with both so that you don't get the paint break on the wood canopy at the front end. But that would be my only comment, and I'm in support of approving the case. So thanks for your time.
Yes.
Vice Mayor, Board Member Gushgary would also like to
Oh,
speak
okay.
on this.
Okay.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Board Member Gushgary, you can speak.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Durham. I have a slight different opinion than the rest of the board. In 2019, this board approved and the council adopted the new Old Town Scottsdale urban architectural design. I happened to be part of that review committee, and so was Vice Chair Craig. We put a lot of effort in that document that specify specifically for Old Town Scottsdale area what color should be followed for the integrity of the whole downtown or Old Town Scottsdale. For that reason, I do not support the case the way it's presented. I would align with staff's opinion that it needs to comply with that guideline that was adopted in 2019, because quite frankly, if this board put a lot of effort, or the previous members of the board put a lot of effort in specific standard guideline, and a subsequent board comes in and negates it and doesn't really pay attention, it's a waste of effort in the city standard policy way. So it needs to comply to those standards, in my opinion. But I also align with board members Brand's suggestions, perhaps make the canopy or the lower level paint slightly different, so that would not be the same way as it's presented. The way it's presented, I would not support it. But I will support an amendment to it like what Mr. Brand suggested. Thank you.
I was confused a bit by this case because I thought it was a continuance to allow the applicant and the staff to discuss, that was their recommendation for a continuance to discuss the color choices with the applicant.
Vice Mayor, that's correct.
But what's on our agenda is a kind of a straight out request for approval of their color scheme. Is that correct? Yes. Yes.
That's what I.
Yeah. You.
Chair.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you're having conversations there that aren't being recorded, so you need to have those conversations on the mic and.
Apologies.
Thank
I'm
you.
clarifying. I thought that I was just saying I was in support of the case moving forward. I did not. maybe I'm continually unaware that I'm making motions on the floor. Could be.
I made the motion when I
Yeah,
spoke first, and I moved to approve it, so it was
And
during my comments.
I
And you seconded, correct?
There you go.
All right. There's a motion and a second, but I think there have also been suggestions of some amendments to the scheme by Mr. Brand and Mr. Craig. Would one of you want to make those as a friendly amendment?
Mr. Faki, would you mind amending your motion for approval to, as a recommendation for a third color to be shared for a continuous color on the underside of the canopy, members?
Is the applicant fine by that, I guess?
She's shaking her head.
So if you're saying that we change where the
column and
awning
beam.
is?
The beam and the column.
As long as we can keep the white and the pink to distinguish, because we are very small.
This,
And I also wanted to mention, I don't know if I can or not, I wanted to
You already
mention,
are, go ahead.
a part of your 2022 strategic plan, it was noted that you guys want to, revise and, keep up with like Old Town's, changing with, all the demographic, all the bachelorette parties coming in. Our draw really is our color. We bring so many people to that street just because we do stick out from the other buildings. And not in a bad way. We are still a Western store, or unconventionally a Western store. Hence the rhinestone boots.
Is that an amendment to the motion acceptable to the attorneys, city attorney?
Sorry, can I add something? The beam in every stores are different color. So what color would we be able to do that? Every beam here is different. It's based on as you see, if you
I apologize, just this conversation, we have not, we didn't see enough of the existing color elevation to make the determination that each bay of that continual canopy is a different color.
It's right here. You see,
Yep.
it's green because they have a green trend.
Right.
Every one of them are different. They're not in one.
So, Chair, we're having a conversation that's not being recorded. If the applicant
Yeah.
would come back.
The applicant is pointing out to the board that there is multiple beams and column colors. I believe that there is a singular canopy out in front of that facade gesture. There is one. There are multiple canopies side by side as you progress down Main Street, but there is one canopy gesture that is the avocado color that reflects the other 2/3 of that building. I'm saying that if we can approve the white color, it doesn't hold up you guys getting a sign in place so before the Super Bowl comes here. You're able to proceed further with that. We are advising the landlord of the building to possibly not have an abrupt change of paint color along a beam line out of the front of the property, and to work with the tenants to have a neutral color that is satisfactory to both tenants so that you have a little bit better presentation underneath the canopy facing the street. And the facade change color is fine. I think that's actually complementary to what was in place before. And I think we've all spoken, with the exception of with Board Member Faki, that we're in support of it. And none of what we're talking about will inhibit you from getting signage up
Thank you.
for the Super Bowl.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm fine with your added stipulation to Board Brent, so.
You understand what that stipulation is? The planning folks do understand the motion, the amendment to the motion, and there's a second. And so we're good with what the motion is. I think there's additional comment, but I just answered the chairman's question, the vice mayor's question. The motion, I think, is understood.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Then I won't make a comment. I'm good. We'll just stop right there.
Good.
I just wanted to ask real quick if the second to the motion, Board Member Joyner, is okay with the amendment?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I do still want to restate, this is a tiny little place, and the colors of it right now do help it stand out. Otherwise, it blends in with the two buildings on the side. I was just there before our meeting, and I really understand
Thank you.
their desire to be different, so. But yes, I'll second that.
Any other questions, comments from the board? If not, then we have a motion and a second to approve 51-DR-2022 Norday exterior paint as amended. Can we please call the roll?
Vice Mayor Durham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgary,
No.
Commissioner Higgs.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have to go back to work.
You have them for men? All right, next order of business is the election of a new vice chair to succeed Board Member Craig. On this issue, it will be a vote only by the 5 public members of the Development Review Board to nominate and elect a vice chair. Do we have any nominations for a vice chair?
Vice Mayor Durham, I'd like to make a motion or a nomination to Jeff Brand as the vice chair.
Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
We have a motion and a second to elect Jeff Brand as
Is
the
there knowledge that I'm unable to know if I'm making motions or not
So,
among the board?
so just so we get this procedurally, Vice Mayor and the rest, you don't need to make a motion, you just need to make a nomination.
All right, thank you.
The person that's nominated, unless they object, it's going to be assumed that they are okay with that nomination. They're not being forced into it.
I nominate Board Member Brand.
Do we need a second?
No.
No. So, board member,
There may be other nominations.
Yeah, there could be other nominations.
board member Jeff Brand has been nominated. Are there other nominations?
Board Member Gushgary, just wanted to ask if you had any other nominations.
I do not. I support Brand.
Thank you. Can we take a roll call then, the public members of the board regarding the nomination of Jeff Brand as vice chair?
Vice Chair Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Abstain.
You can go ahead and vote for yourself. That's fine.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgary.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board member Brand has been nominated and voted on as the vice chair of the Development Review Board. Our next item is the 2022 Development Review Board Annual Report. It's submitted for review, discussion, and possible approval of the annual report. Do we?
Yeah, just know real quickly, this is our typical annual report. We did get one minor correction from Board Member Gushgary ahead of the meeting, which we made that correction. But other than that, if there's any other questions, we're happy to incorporate those changes or take a motion to approve that annual report.
Are there any questions or comments on the annual report? If not, is there a motion to approve the annual report?
I make a motion to approve the annual report.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to review the board annual report, the Development Review Board annual report. Can you please call the roll?
Vice Chair Craig,
Yes.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yes.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Gushgary.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Just want to know real quickly, actually, we need the votes of both Vice Mayor Durham and Commissioner Higgs on that one as well.
Vice Mayor Durham,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgs.
Yes.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is an update to section 4.1.4-1.103 of the Design Standards and Policies Manual
And I believe we have a presentation from staff on this issue.
Good afternoon, everyone. Vice Mayor Durham, Vice Chair Craig, Commissioner Higgs, members of the board. I'm Hassan Mushtaq, Floodplain Administrator for the City of Scottsdale, here to present some changes to the DSPM Section 4-1.101. City of Scottsdale, we participate in the National Flood Insurance Program, NFIP. It's a voluntary program, they say, but as you know, it's a federal program, so it's kind of mandatory for us to participate. For participating in the program, we get a rating, what they call is CRS, the Community Rating System. Scottsdale, we're at Class 5. Everybody starts at Class 10 with no reduction or discounts in their policies, the flood insurance policies. We're at 5, so we receive 25% discount in flood insurance policies. You know, Northeast Scottsdale is majority of the area is in a floodplain, so folks, homeowners, carry flood insurance policies, and that's the discount we get because of this program. Annually, we have to certify this program, meaning to NFIP, we have to tell them we are doing certain things regulation-wise, design-wise, development-wise. We're following certain rules of the law. We have to certify that on an annual basis. CRS comes and audits us every 5 years. Last audit was in 2022. We're still finishing up that audit, trying to get over the hump, get a passing grade. Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, comes in town and audits communities on and off in an infrequent basis, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 7 years. Last time they audited what they call actually is Community Assistance Visit, CAV, but it's an audit actually of the program. And last time they audited us in 2012, and a report came out on that date. In that report, they've identified some areas to improve and asked City of Scottsdale to act on 5 different items. These are listed here. Bullet number 1 asks for a flood insurance ordinance that has been done in 2012, subsequent to that audit, and it's been in place since that time. They requested some documentation on 25 properties in a table format. They provided the city staff at the time. That tells you that these folks, their reviewers, auditors, were in town. They walked around sites. They picked up development activities going on in the area. They've asked for permit files, documents that were used to issue the permit and those kinds of things. Those have been collected and put together as well. Third bullet, what's highlighted is the item of discussion for today's meeting. There is a procedure called substantial improvement. As I spoke about, many homes are in a floodplain, and when these homeowners come in, they intend to add on to their square footage. They want to increase the footprint of the property, take the patio area and make it a livable space, or convert a garage into livable space. When those are done, if that value of that improvement to that property in a floodplain exceeds a certain amount, they have to follow today's standards. That certain amount, that magic number is 50%. So if somebody proposes to improve a property in a floodplain more than 50%, you must follow today's standards, not 10 years ago or 25 years ago. So we have to make some changes. They reviewed that process we have in City of Scottsdale. They proposed some changes and so forth. Those changes have been done, and in 2018 version of the SPM, those changes were incorporated into the manual. A couple of more items they listed in that report was to provide a chronology of a variance City of Scottsdale issued in 2007 in DC Ranch, variance to the floodplain management regulation. Those are being worked on. We're still collecting that data. And the last item was to improve the City of Scottsdale's permitting process for fences and walls. As you know, floodplain, it's kind of difficult because it's an open space. People think we can enjoy it, we can have recreation and whatnot. But when you have homes, properties, we would like to put our own fences and walls, which provide a resistance to the flow if there is a flood coming through. So when we permit these fences and walls, we have to have a process that is in sync with the floodplain management regulation and so forth. The item that impacts the DSPM is this section 4-1.103. Staff making some changes based on the recommendation from FEMA and Arizona Department of Water Resources. That's the state agency that regulates us. We're also updating a document in the hyperlink. In your packet, you have a page of text that's been crossed out, redlined. So those are the changes we're talking about. The figure number needs to be updated. Of course, there was a little error in there, and the figure itself in that manual has to be updated. Figure I'm referring to is also in your packet, and this is the chart. It's a little difficult to see, but the crux of the thing is that circle around that rectangle is being modified. Next slide is going to be a little, still not too clear, but in a nutshell, what the square asks for, these developments, these proposed improvements to a structure in a floodplain, when they come to the city for a permit, regardless of what percentage that is, improvement-wise, we ask them to, the floor of that improved area to be raised at least a foot or two to meet today's standards, because that's the standard that we have to meet. Notice that the threshold of 50% is not caught in that box. It says if you have an improvement, you raise the floor to that level. Number one is cost. Number two, it becomes a little difficult with an existing floor being lower, possibly. This new addition of your patio into a livable space or a garage into a livable space, it's going to stay 18 inches to 24 inches above the existing floor. Becomes a challenge for the homeowner, but the regulatory requirement has to be met, so those were being followed. The box on the right is the modification staff is requesting is that if the 50% threshold is not met, if the improvements over time, 5 years, is less than 50%, the new addition to the home can remain at the same level. So number one, it helps the cost. Number two, it doesn't create this elevation difference in the floor, so there is a difficulty to go from one level to the other, ADA issues and what have you. It still meets all FEMA guidelines, all ADW requirements and everything. Just a little relaxation on the rule that we have been following in the past can be done in a different way, and in the process, the change has to be made. So that's the end of my presentation, actually. And if there are any questions, I can certainly try to entertain them.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
I have one question. By lowering the standards, does that subject the city to any legal ramifications should a flood take place and then the homeowner or whomever decided to sue the city because we didn't enforce the recommended height?
We're not recommending to lower the elevation. We are asking that they can remain at the same level at which they were built.
Right.
At the time, hopefully we did the right thing, and at the time the home was built, it probably followed the then current regulation. If you recall, in 2016, we increased our higher regulatory standards to, I don't know if you've heard, 1 foot, meaning that we now regulate a foot above the flood level. Prior to 2016, that was not the case. So anybody built before that, today's standards, if we want to go audit them, they will be below the level. So those are the situations where improvements are being proposed. We just don't feel it's reasonable. If they're below 50% in 5 years, it's reasonable to ask them to elevate to create this difference in elevation. ADA issues come in and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's very nice, but my question is, are we in any way liable if a lawsuit came because we changed, decreased our requirement, they flooded, would they have an ability to sue the city?
He's probably not qualified to answer that question. Vice Mayor, members of the board.
I knew you would.
Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer, especially because it's fact specific in terms of what actually occurred and the flooding and any damage that may have occurred. So just because the standard may have been changed doesn't necessarily indicate that the city could be liable for that change. There's just so many factors that are involved that it'd be really difficult to just give a yes or no answer or any answer to
Well, we all know
in
how
this
much
open
people
forum.
like to sue, so.
Well, yes, I do understand the concern and the nature of the question. It's just that the answer is just very difficult to give, being on just a single question like that.
Can I ask the same question in a technical matter, I guess? So if you guys get the DSPM approved based on your revision, which is, I'm so glad I see this, but are you in compliance with FEMA? I mean, you mentioned the audit, so, and it seems you are. So how much flexibility you guys have with FEMA? Because this is go into a lot of items I would like to discuss with you related to those garage elevations. So what's the flexibility for city to update the DSPM with FEMA? Because this is one topic. We have a bunch of AO zone on the north side that doesn't even exist, but it is on paper. And I'm coming in adding 6 feet of fill for water that the watershed moved, a long time ago, right? So how much flexibility you guys have?
Member Joyner, Member Faki, I'll get back to your question a little later, but to answer your question, we're not reducing the standard by any means. What I'm asking is that what we were doing, we were proactive a little bit more, so we were asking everybody to raise up. The regulatory requirement is, at a minimum, you have to be at or above the existing floor. So if we can go back to the minimum, which is fine with FEMA and the state, I don't believe there is any basis for any lawsuits coming in. Even if it does, we can protect ourselves. Going back to Member Faki's question, with FEMA, the federal agencies, we typically don't have a lot of flexibility. This was one I found out that we were doing above and beyond, for which we were not getting any credits from CRS, neither from NFIP. So I looked at the situation. As a matter of fact, the question came to mind when 3 cases hit my desk, and I started inquiring about why are we doing this, based on what requirement and so forth. That led to the question that FEMA did ask us to do some reviews, which we did, and then it resulted in this little bit of relaxation. But in a grand scheme of things, not a whole lot works with FEMA as far as rules are concerned.
Okay, so a couple of questions, because if we're doing the DSPM, and we went through this case actually on Pima and Legacy. It was a cottages development where they have a very small garages on part of their floor plan. Fair enough? So the question is, when you come in a garage, can the definition, because we went to flood control for it, and they end up referring us back to the city, because the city is the one usually dealing with the FEMA audit, and they're the one liable for whatever FEMA, put together. So does the city has the authority, part of this DSPM amendment is to define what livable area is. Can the definition of a garage not be defined as a livable unit, I guess? So the garage finished floor elevation could be stepped 4 inches from the residence, because a lot of those residents, new homes, they have a finished floor elevation. You go into your garage, you always have 4 to 6 inch step, right? But based on the current, at least from the previous interpretation we get from staff, your finished floor elevation has to meet also the minimum FEMA regulation elevation.
Member Faki, are you asking if the garage has to be the minimum floor?
Currently, correct.
The rules are a little difficult, it's not as black and white as you would think. The garage is not a livable space. However, if it's attached to the building, then it becomes a part of the building. However, it's not livable. So the rules apply to the livable space of the structure, the portion. So the finished floor, the lowest floor, must meet the requirement. The garage floor can remain below the BFE. However, it needs to be wet flood proofed, is what they call. So if you have those tools in place, the mechanism for wet flood proofing, the garage lowest level can remain below the base flood elevation, still be meeting the requirement.
Well, again, I'd go back to the area of North Scottsdale, and I don't know where you guys at on all of this AO zone update, right? Is there a flexibility for determination by staff? If you're an AO zone and staff, make the determination that it's not an active AO zone based on whatever study going on, can this create some flexibility for developer or future residents? Because I'm giving you, again, example, we know for a fact there is no 2 feet of water going and sheet flowing on a property. We're still raising the finished floor elevation sometimes 6 feet because of difference grade, right? Do you guys have this flexibility to change this definition, or at least get you the authority in this DSPM to say, well, if staff determine that there is no active sheet flowing going on based on AO zone, maybe we don't enforce this FEMA regulation?
Member Faki, that's a higher level question. However, it's possible. If you recall, fans 5 and 6 up in the upper watersheds in Phoenix and Scottsdale, that effort was taken and an active alluvial fan was declared an inactive and the AO zone were removed. That level of effort needs to go in. Staff level, FEMA will not allow us to determine if an active alluvial fan can be considered an inactive, and then the 2 feet requirement goes away. That needs to happen through the regional agency, Flood Control District of Maricopa County, Riata Wash, for example, Rawhide Wash, for example. Some of that is happening, but across the board, that's not a possibility that staff level can say you're not in an AO zone and your requirement is less.
Okay, fair enough. Couple of other questions. I mean, we missed the DSPM. I'm so glad to see the update back here. Yeah. But we look at this like almost 1.5 years ago. And we all, in different level, we spent some effort to mark up this DSPM, give recommendation, and then we never seen it back. And I think some of our recommendation probably created more work or created more headache, but we really would like to see this back. I don't know if we could do another study session, but at this stage, I mean, this is my last 9-10 months here on DRB. I would hope we can get this DSPM back to discuss, especially the drainage portion. Like, because drainage staff here, a lot of times they're regulated by item that zoning get to be approving that they cannot implement just because of DSPM. And I think I have a lot of discussion with staff about, especially Old Town, the underground retention, the easement requirement for some of those infill urban projects. So I don't know I know this is not tied to it, but we really need to bring this back, and we need to discuss if we're amending this drainage section. I don't know if we could do it all at once or not, but.
Yeah, Vice Mayor Durham, Board Member Faki, unfortunately, the project manager for the DSMPM, Eliana Hayes, couldn't make it today, but in discussion, she relayed to me that there is an intent to bring back future updates to that. I think there is going to be an overarching project to do that that's going to be more comprehensive than what our floodplain administrator is bringing forward today. And from what I understand, and he can clarify that, but I think this is kind of a critical thing they want to move forward ahead of any future changes. So I think there's some urgency to what this update they're doing here today. But I think there is some intent to bring back a more comprehensive review of the DSMPM in the not too distant future.
Okay, Mr. Carr, I take, I mean, the challenge with your word urgency, it's really troubling for me. Because some of these items that are happening in the DSPM, especially in the drainage section, they have very similar urgency. You as a staff planning, you're approving stuff through the zoning case, sometimes cannot be built when it comes to drainage based on your DSPM, especially in Old Town. I mean, we're getting stuff, I know several situations, we're working on cases where there is a stipulation to meet the DSPM, but the proposed zoning, which is 0 lot, you have building coming all the way to the property line, you're still required to have underground retention. I cannot give you an underground retention. I cannot give you an easement. There is urgency based on what's going on right now on a project that approved or been approved. This been said, I understand how busy you guys are, and I understand how much stuff going on, and I'm not trying to tie this together because I understand this. If we can at least bring the drainage piece forward, then we can maybe do it by section. Maybe bring drainage and utilities and whatnot. Maybe something we can discuss with Mr. Hayes. We have a study session. But I truly urge you guys to look at this. I have several projects we're going through right now, approved through zoning. We're trying to be creative with staff how to implement what's been approved when it comes to drainage. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the input. And I wasn't to suggest that any other projects aren't urgent as well. It was just, I know that they're kind of working under some national requirements there.
Understood.
Vice Mayor Durham, I also know that Board Member Gishgari would like to speak on this item as well.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Gashgari.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Durham. I've got two comments to make. One is directed to Mr. Mushtaq, and the other is to Mr. Carr. Mr. Mushtaq, I think the section 4.-1.103 is urgent, as you suggested, and I'm in full agreement with you. But I do have a question about the diagram. Just for my own clarification, item or note number 3 in the diagram refers to the structures need to be at base flood elevation plus 1 foot of freeboard for all structures. So the question in my mind is, what is a structure? In other words, is the AC, concrete, or the machineries are considered structures? And the reason I'm asking that question is because if the AC unit or the machinery's platform is considered structures, do they need to be BFE plus 1 foot of freeboard? I don't think they do, because that's not what the NFIP suggested. So that's the first question I have. And the second question to Mr. Carr basically echoes Mr. Fakih's comment. My personal terms expire for the DRB in August of 2023. I've been here 6.5 years. And I would love to see the DSMPM update comes before us and gets approved before my departure. And the reason for that is, I'm being selfish here. The main reason I joined the DRB 6 years ago is the thrust of my intention is to update the DSMPM only because there are several sections is really dated and they need to be updated. We're all in agreement with this, but it took forever, for a long time, to get those approval processed or modified. And I think we need to put it in an urgent status where perhaps, as Mr. Fakih suggested, segmented it or give us a dateline. Every so many weeks or months, we should have a section brought in and modified and approved and amended. I think it's time to do that. So I'll leave it to Mr. Mushtaq to respond to my first comment.
Vice Chair Durham, Member Gishgari, thank you for the question. In FEMA's definition, a structure has to have 2 walls and a roof. That is regulated by the FEMA regulations. Now, the equipment, the HVAC system that supports the utilities, that supports the building to become habitable, are also considered a part of that structure. So not only the lowest floor elevation of that building, but the equipment servicing the building has to be at the same level. Otherwise, if the floods do come, your HVAC, your utilities will be underwater, building will be unserviceable, and losses may occur. So the regulation applies to AC, HVAC, and all other utilities servicing the same building to be at the same level, which is meet the FEMA standards, in our case, BFE plus 1 foot.
Is that in compliance with the NFIP guidelines?
NFIP standard is the minimum, which is the BFE. City of Scottsdale, we chose to do a foot above that BFE, so that's why you keep hearing this 1 foot plus 1 foot all the time. But the minimum requirement by FEMA and NFIP is at or above the BFE. The community chooses to become more stringent, more proactive, and provide additional protection to the structures if there is a flood.
Okay, I accept that explanation, and I agree that the municipality has more stringent guidelines. They're allowed to do so. The only reason, by the way, Mr. Mushtaq, I do support that concept, but there are many circumstances when you go with the BFE plus 1 foot, is grading-wise becomes very difficult to achieve. But I fully understand the logic behind it. So thank you for the explanation. Now I go to my second comment to Mr. Brad Carr.
Absolutely, Vice Mayor Durham, Board Member Gishgari. I think what I'd like to do is speak with, again, the project manager for this, which is Eliana Hayes, and see what her timeline is for the update. Maybe, as you mentioned, there's an ability to segment that, that update process to address some of the more critical or urgent items, as Mr. Faki mentioned, in a more, in a timeline that's more sooner than maybe that the overall update occurs. So I will speak with Eliana Hayes, and we'll consult with all of our staff on the possibility of bringing forward those drainage stormwater updates. Thank you.
Mr. Carr, will you be able to give us update on the second hearing, on the discussion?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? This does not require any action from the board. So we proceed to our next item, which is the rules of procedure for the Development Review Board. This item is on the agenda for review and possible direction to staff regarding the rules of procedure.
Yes, Vice Mayor Durham, excuse me. This is just our annual review of our rules of procedure. If there are no updates that the board members have, that's fine. This is more of a prompt to see if anybody has any questions or items they'd like to address. And if they do, we'll bring that forward on a future hearing.
Are there any comments, questions regarding the rules of procedure?
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. If not, that concludes our business for the day. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Durham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Craig,
Yep.
Board Member Joyner,
Yes.
Board Member Brand,
Yep.
Board Member Faki,
Yes.
Board Member Gishgari,
Yes.
Commissioner Higgs.
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.